Okay, so I'm back with Tim.
Hello again.
Great to have you here again. And we've talked a lot now, but today we're going to talk about the project you're doing with the year sixes at Manor, and specifically the part of the project where you help them with transitioning from year 6 to secondary school. As always, just to put out there, anyone that finds anything interesting in our conversation, I really strongly recommend they stop the podcast and order the books. Path Through the Jungle, the books, The Hidden Chimp, the Silent Guides. Also, again, it's important to say that parents and carers are best placed to be the biggest experts in the children, in their children. We're just trying to offer helpful things. We hope they're helpful. We hope they're relevant. But parents and carers are the experts in their children. And the final thing, which I've remembered again for Stephen, is we are recording in a school, so there might be some sound. There might be, some children laughing and playing.
It's the best thing you can
happily.
Hear, yeah.
Or there might be a bin wagon beeping as it reverses, onto the car park. So, with all that said, Tim, welcome back. I don't know if you'd like to talk about sort of the transition, the secondary transition sort of sessions as an overview, and then we could just dig into a little bit of detail.
I've just had a cereal bar, so my teeth are full of things. Yum, yum, yum. Sorry. Anyway, right. The session is obviously we've only always for disclosure we've got an hour with the students, so and we're going to make the best use of the hour that we can. And the previous podcast we talked about, the structure of working with anybody's chimp, not just young people's chimp. So it follows the structure of let them express about what it feels like first, to be facing this thing that you're facing. Let's make sure. Then let's get behind why you're feeling why. Generally, a chimp could be feeling like it is, but then let's nut that out into why is your chimp feeling like it is, and then it goes into we'll normalise that it's okay to feel like that, but what are your plans to settle your chimp down so that you can go and make the most of what's happening? So that's the general flow of all the sessions that we do, and that kind of mirrors what we did in the previous one at SATS. I think. So going into the detail.
But can I, sorry, interrupting.
Go on.
But again, the vision for this whole thing since the day we sort of came together, it wasn't to help year 6 children transitioning to year 7.
No.
It was to help give a group of people an understanding and a skill set that they could use every time they have to start something new, every time they move house or move job or whatever it might be. That yes, like we've got this thing which causes all these sort of anxieties and excitement and fear and everything else that comes with it. And yes, we want to help those children right now, but we want to help them in a way that's going to serve them long after they finish school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, the session that we do with the staff, isn't it? We mirror.
Yeah.
We kind of mirror the content that we're doing with the students. So yeah, wholeheartedly agree with that. This is a holistic skill around change, around loss. There's all sorts of things that go into this. Detail, and it probably suits what you've just said, is that we kick it off. It's not called the transition session, it's called crossing a bridge. That's the name of the session. I'm going to help my chimp cross this bridge, and the thing we kind of land with them is how many bridges have your chimp already crossed before now, and how many bridges is it going to have to cross throughout your life? So normalising what they're actually about to go through. So I think you want me to break the session down into kind of its pieces.
What I'm trying to picture is like, how can this serve the parents that that we are serving with this? And I know that a lot of them will want to say, okay, then let me help you. Let me do the same sorts of things. Let me run with them. Let me continue with them.
Yeah.
So you start the session with this. We're crossing a bridge.
Yeah.
You've crossed bridges before.
It's good that we've done that. It's reminded me to bring that out in the session. I kind of forgotten about that,
And there's all these bridges you'll cross in the future, so putting it in perspective as well.
Yeah.
And then what? So then how does it continue?
Well, so the first thing, we worked together with this, and I learned a lot about kind of how to educate through putting these sessions together. So the first bit is getting them to do some group work, and again, like normalizing, so that they're with each other and they use a set of post-it notes and come up with the 6 biggest triggering things that a chimp could be worried or concerned about making this move to high school. Mm-hmm. So they have this debate in their small groups. So that does two things. Initially, it normalizes it because they start to look at each other and going, they're worrying about the same thing that my chimp's worrying about. So there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah,
that's normal.
Yeah.
So that's cathartic in itself, and that's just a basic principle of group therapy, and is the universalization, which is, this is relevant to everybody, and normalizing how I'm feeling about this. That in itself is a therapeutic process. Mm-hmm. Now, the second part of that is that they then, in their own worksheet, have the pictures of 6 post-it notes, and then they have to prioritize what they believe is their chimp's 6th least fearful thing through to its first biggest priority fear. And in the debate, it's great to see the kids debating, and you brought this out. You definitely you gave me this concept of teaching, watching the students debate when they're doing it and going, no, I think that one, like worrying about being bullied should be number 1, and then somebody else will go, no, it's about getting lost, that's number 1.
Yeah.
So getting them to come to that's okay. It's great that you're discussing, because you're taking ownership and you're making you realise what it is for your chimp here. But now get it down, what are your chimp's 6?
So they switch from we do it as a group, rationalise their own thinking, critique their own fears as a group, normalise it, then they do their own.
Debate it with each other and realise, hang on a minute, I don't think that one is. So it formulates it in their head.
So they step out of that group think and then they capture their own. They lost the argument. The group, their fear was number 1. Bullying was the number 1 thing for them.
They may agree with what they had with the group as well, absolutely. So what they've got now is something relatively hard and fast, which is, here's my, they might not even have 6, but here's what I believe to be the 6 of the key things that my chimp is fearful of, that then could create anxiety, because now it'll start to worry and think about it. So about those things. So these are my 6 things. So that's something for, if this is take home, the parents can actually tap into that. And actually now you're seeing what's lying behind the emotion that you might see that your child experiencing. So you've got that now.
Yeah.
But then I'm turning the worksheet over, you'll be able to hear that. Then it is now going into the bottom half of the equation now. So now we're looking into kind of the ways of I can deal with it.
So just go back over the equation for me.
So it's feeling of fear, the anxiety equation, fear plus thought over what's my capacity to deal with this.
Yeah. So we've captured
what's
the fears.
My belief I can.
Captured the fears on the post-its. We've got whatever we think about them. Now you're the next part of your process is to let's look at your ability to cope with this, and then if it's lacking, let's add to it.
Absolutely. So it goes to a few things, but it's just quite like questions that they talk in groups and go through. There's a little activity to realise. Well, the first thing is that getting them to go into kind of what have I got control of and what have I not got control of, which is, again, we talked about that in the previous episode. So, there's some questions here in him. What kind of control about my change of school? So getting them to think about what are the things I can really, have I got an element of control of here? What does my chimp need to accept? What he can't control? So writing some of those things down. Then we go into this concept of you've got 6 things that you're worried about here. Trying to pick off all 6 is really, really difficult. So I'm going into the detail of the session here, but we're doing a little exercise with tennis balls where they realised that if they only had one thing that the chimp was worrying about, it'd be quite. This is like the bricks thing that we were talking about early in the previous episode. If you only had one thing that the chimp was worried about, it'd be really easy to juggle it. You could just throw it up in the air and catch it. But we keep loading them up with tennis balls. So they realise, actually, I'm going to have to start to work on some of these things because I can't keep 6 in the air all times.
Yeah.
So it's prioritising that thing and then going into, right, who are the people that can help you?
Okay.
So then you start to identify, I'm going to need help around some of the things that I can't control and these worries. Who are the people that I'm going to go to? But we also talk in there about the consequences of not asking for help.
Yeah.
And again, like conceptualising it, we use a rucksack with weights in. You know, like, can you imagine carrying 6 massive 10-kilo weights around on your back all the time about this? What's it going to feel like? How's it going to wear you down? How do we actually get these weights out of the bag? So getting them to realise the only way that they can do it, because I've zipped it up on the person's back, is that they have to ask somebody to come out of the audience, out of the class, and have to unzip the bag and take it out of them. And that's sort of sharing these issues. You know, that can help. But then we're into which is what the kids will bring back, which is then we're into kind of a bit of a flow diagram, which is the problem solving for the chimp. So I'm reading it from here. So the first thing is, the first box of the flow diagram is, who do I talk to my chimp about this thing? Who's the best person? What's the problem? And who do I need to talk to it about? Then it's, what am I going to say to my chimp to put it in its place, to box it? And then what's the plan, the practical plan to practice, and the emotional plan to practice before I actually make this move to high school or whatever the change is. So to read some examples here, and you came up with these, so there we go, and they're still in here. You won't remember them.
I'm concerned about what this is, the quality of this now.
So it's so for the 3 boxes that flow into each other. So the example that we've got is I'm worried I'll get lost on the way to school, and the question is who's the best person to talk to? And we've written the example, parents. Then the next column is, how do I box my chimp here? So what am I going to say to it? And what we've written as an example here is, it's normal to worry about doing something new. I worried about joining my Sunday league team, but I soon got used to it, and I never worry about it now. And what's the plan about how to get the chimp to feel feel less scared and to deal with its anxious thoughts? Is, I'll walk the new route to school with my parents in the summer holiday to make me more familiar with it. I'll also walk it with my friends and on my own, just in case they're off school for some reason. Yeah. So there's an emotional and practical plan with that.
And I'd like to sort of speak to that there and say that that's not me at all. That was a child at a previous school, right. And from one of your sessions. And again, this is something, and I hope that anyone listening to this is thinking, I can. This is a transferable process, and to see the way that the pupils set out their fears, and then you move them into, normalising them, but then also turning them into a plan. That was a real eye-opener for me in sort of how to work with children, but how to work with people as well, is to say, right, let's turn your fears, let's turn into a plan. And then that whole thing about your chimp being your best friend really comes into play then, because then instead of this being this thing that I have to try and keep happy, or if I have to try and stop worrying, or it's such a burden to me, I just have to listen to it and act. And then, because actually getting lost on the way to school could be a really big problem. Yeah. So, and that plan that child came up with, and they were the one that ran with it and said, I'll do it with my parents. And I was like, there we go, job done, brilliant. And they said, no, I'm going to walk it with my friends as well. And actually, I'll walk it on my own just in case. But they off they went.
Well, that's chimp friendly, isn't it? As well, it's chimp friendly because it starts off with who the chimp believes it's like 100% secure with. Then it goes to the next level, and then it goes, I think I can do it on my own now.
Yeah.
So without knowing that child has come up with a chimp friendly plan.
And when you go to the equation, like that thing of, right, can I cope with it? I can cope with it because I don't know my parents. Yeah, but can you cope with it without your parents? Let's see. Yeah. Okay, but now I can cope with it with my mates. But can you cope with it on your own? Okay, then let's see. Yeah. And there you go. That's that equation.
That's the what ifs. So it's dealt with the what ifs, which is, what if my parents can't do it? What if my friends can't do it?
And us as parents or people helping anybody, it's just facilitating that, giving them that space. But if we hadn't listened in the first place, if we hadn't actually heard the actual fears, if we thought, well, they're worried about how hard the work is, so I'll just help them with their work and I'll do extra revision with them, you're never actually coming up with a plan to help them. So that's why that first step, and I know, like, you know, but it is just so crucial to really listen.
So you know what we'd advocate is that, you know, they start getting plans for their, maybe not all 6, because some of them you could just dissipate just through letting their chimp exercise about it. Some of them will need some more work, you know, and so using that flow diagram to number 1 and 2 is to go, right, what are the worries? Why is it such a worry? What's the reality here? How do we get perspective? How do we box the chimp? What we're going to say to it? But what's the plan?
Yeah, and I guess to normalise it for everybody, the typical ones, bullying is very high at secondary school, isn't it? Not being able to cope with the work.
Yeah, it's going to be too difficult.
Not being able to cope with the homework. New people, especially if they go into a secondary school where their friends aren't, you know, they haven't got a big group of friends going, getting lost, not getting on with the teachers. And I can remember actually in a previous session again, one of the pupils said, you know, my fear is that the children, because they'd gone through this process, they asked the teacher in the room, what makes you like a child and what makes you angry? And the teacher had this really open, well, any child that listens, I never dislike a child. I do get frustrated if I'm really trying to help. And it just opened up this conversation. You could just see almost the pupils like, sort of taking notes of here's how I can, but that's a life skill. That's a helpful transferable skill.
The session finishes with, I'm not going to give it away, but there's just a little activity to go, is it going to be all that bad? And your chimp is designed to be catastrophic and paranoid, so it's only doing its job, but let's start to think about things that can make the chimp excited about going. So that's the kind of wrap up, because that's something we always forget. It's like, what's good about this? Because a lot of these kids are excited about it, they just don't know it yet.
Yeah, it's just under a few layers. And I guess, you know, for perspective for any parents or, you know, carers or anybody sort of listening to this and thinking about using it, can you get to a point where you go through these plans and they become so thorough and you know the child so well that you stop that fear, you stop that anxiety, you know, they go into things and it's like, I'm starting a new job because I've done this for 5 years, I'm fine now, that, you know, or is it always about you're going to get, you know, your chimp has a nature and, you know, you're always going to be working with that nature?
I mean, on the specifics, you know, if we're talking about like that as a specific, like I'm worried about getting lost, it's obviously they're going to become desensitized. The chimp will become desensitized over time to that
element.
To that specific. It'll the plan to have dealt with a worry about getting lost will sit latent in the computer that you can, as long as you warm the computer up, it will activate again. But the trigger to warming the computer up might be experiencing fear. You might not do it. You might not be able to recognise, I've done this before and I'm going to a job and I've done this before, so how do I, do you know what I mean? Like, to recognise it from the practical thing that's in front of you, it might be the emotion, the chimp going, I'm worried, and then you have it. Either it looks in the computer and goes, I've got a plan for this, or we have to remind it. We have to warm the computer up beforehand, so then it's got it.
But it's quite likely that I'm worried is going to always be there, and it's just going to hopefully have helpful things in the computer to follow that.
Yeah, the nature of the chimp is what the nature of the chimp is. I think Steve, if Professor Steve was here now, he'd say if the computer becomes really well programmed, it will override because it's so fast. If you get it programmed really well, it will take over from the chimp instantly. So if the program is in the computer, this is, if the program in the computer is really well programmed, then because it's 5 times faster than the chimp, it will just go. But these are very kind of, we're getting into the land of grade A grade A hits versus truths. Mm-hmm. These are very specific to situations and contexts. Mm-hmm. That's not it's not general enough fear. So it's specific to that. Do you know what I mean? It's not like if you could bottom that out into what actually is the fear here is.
Yeah.
The fear is that I'm going to be on my own. I'm going to be rejected. Yeah. And I can't deal. Or the fear is I can't deal with stuff. Then because often, we're getting really deep here. But with that, what we're dealing with is just the surface beliefs. Yeah. It's not the core belief that's sitting behind it. It's like. I can't deal with stuff. I'm not an adult, or once you start to hit those, then you'll eradicate.
Yeah.
These generalized worries about stuff.
So I don't want to go too deep. I always do. But that's not. I don't think that's the most helpful thing. But what we're talking about here is, a process to involve the chimp so they get to know themselves, that part of their brain, and then they can use it. So rather than being in a battle with it, it can go straight into their practical plans and the things that they do to cope with this specific thing that's on their radar.
They will learn to box their chimp through this.
Yeah.
That's what they recognise, accept, normalise, expect it, accept it, and take care of it. That's what they'll learn to do. What you've just talked about there is like changing your computer to like really make you express who you are all the time. Mm-hmm. But that's when you're getting into this is the stuff that kids will find very difficult to do, which is around truths and values.
So I guess that's a cautionary tale, maybe, like to say, those are separate things. Let's not look too deeply. What we're looking to do is to deal with this circumstance. If they're really upset about going to secondary school or starting piano lessons or joining a new football team, let's deal with that first.
Yeah.
And I guess every situation is different, but those are two separate things: working deeply and working with a practical situation.
There is, but in this conversation, I think there's a muddy waters of where the mind is, like, identity is really coming on strong of, like, year 6 to, like, year 9. Mm-hmm. If you can get in early with, like, who am I?
Okay.
So let's go back to it. If a young person in year 2 has decided that they are Spider-Man, that's who I am. Uh-huh. So then at 11, when you say to them, you're going to a new high school, and they've completely embedded their identity as Spider-Man, they will go to high school as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And why would a Spider-Man just go, yeah, come on, bring it on?
Yeah, so you're saying Spider-Man as in someone who's brave and someone who's resilient.
Exactly.
They're not trying climbing walls.
No, they believe this is who I am.
Yeah. And the opposite of that too.
My self-image is this.
Is I'm anxious, or I'm not good at tests, or I can't handle this.
Exactly.
And they embed that, they take that with them.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So coming back to it, at an older age, we can start to get this, what we call stone of life concept, which is, can I get perspective? Do I accept the world as it is? Do I accept truths like life's not fair and nobody's perfect and I will make mistakes and 1 in 5 people won't like me? And what are my values though? And so that will stabilise you. If somebody had convinced me, like as a kid, Alan, cricket is a bit of a shared thing. It's something that fell out of my life. But as a kid, I believed I was Ian Botham, and everything that was about Ian Botham, that's what I did. And people were going, who's he? But he was just like this swashbuckling guy that appeared to be not frightened of anything or anybody and would represent him. That was who I believed I was. Uh-huh. Up until being about like 14, when like your identity. But I took on every challenge of life as him. Mm-hmm. And so if you can embed that, who are you? And that's who I actually am. But, you learn a bit more about these people, don't you? And what they're fallible and this, that and the other. But if that makes sense,
it does. So if we separate those two things, and again...
We've gone somewhere else here.
We have, as always. But I think it's helpful as well, because I think as we've naturally gone down this path, I'm sure a lot of other people would naturally go down this path. So first steps, especially with younger people, are be aware if you're dealing with a practical thing. And even if you're dealing with a very practical thing, get their feelings on it. Get them to express exactly how they feel on it. Give them an opportunity to rationalise that so they can actually pull it apart. Then come up with a practical way to deal with those things.
Yeah.
But then, as a secondary thing, be deliberate in supporting them in creating the most helpful identity that they can,
Yes.
even at a young age.
What's my self-image? Who am I?
The most helpful, the most authentic to them. But those two things are different. But, be deliberate with both of them.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Is there anything that, again, especially for, say, a parent who, any kind of transition, like their child is about to start something new, or what's the sort of final thoughts for them in your experience of, there's been lots of different people that you've helped with the, like.
Yeah, I'm stuck on something that you've just said. So, it just brings out, the example that we read out, and I'm going to reiterate what I've said throughout, like a bit of a running theme through with all the particularly the last two things that we've talked about, recorded. If we go back to that plan of that student that you work with about getting lost on the way to school, don't jump. If it would have been so easy to go, what we'll do is practice walking to school. Mm-hmm. But all that child would have done, if you'd not done the first step, which is exercise, all that child would have done was not concentrated on how to go to school, concentrated on, what if I don't get there? What if... Every time he walked it, their chimp would have been in the driving seat and they'd have just kept thinking, I can't remember where I am now, and what if... They wouldn't have been going through... It wouldn't have been in human mode going, right, program my computer. Right, which way am I going? Okay, can I do this? Yes. Have I done it before? So if you've not done the exercising bit, the plan won't work. Mm-hmm. That's like me trying to, work with a bike rider and trying to teach them to do some really complicated skill on the bike when all they're thinking about is falling off. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or looking stupid. I can't teach them anything because the brain has got, it's not in that mode. So I've got to sit down first and go, right, this session we're about to do, what are you worried about? Mm-hmm. Just tell me, go on, tell me what's the thing that's... Yeah, I get that. I get it. What we're going to do? Like I used to do examples here again, but it was like my job was to teach people to ride around the velodrome. If you've seen the velodrome, I've talked about it before, wooden thing, like numerous meters high, really, really steep. One of the skills that I had to be able to do was be able to ride around the top of it, like this wall of death, as slow as they possibly could. Now, straight away, they're going to fall like however many meters down into the bottom if they don't get it right. But you had to get through all that kind of like, what's your fear? What are you worried about? And then go, right, what are you going to do? But you couldn't just go stay. I had to assess all these young people and go, right, who's Chimp's really worrying about this? Mm-hmm. Before I send them, I could have just said, what you got to do is press left leg and constantly squeeze and look up the track. Mm-hmm. They can't hear me. Mm-hmm. They can't hear me if they're going, but I'm going to fall off, 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 and what if I fall off? And then, what if I might break my leg? And then if I break my leg, I'll never be a bike rider again.
And just to sort of, by letting them express, by encouraging them to express, that part of their brain, it stops shouting and it goes, well, I've been heard now. Yeah. This thing we're talking about is about my thing. Yeah. Whereas if it hasn't had that chance, it's like all he wants is us to cycle around really effectively. Yes. He doesn't know what I'm actually worried about. Exactly. So by doing that, you get them out the driving seat because they're like, oh, this thing is relevant to the things that I'm worried about. Yeah. So then, so that's the takeaway is just don't miss that step.
Yeah, don't jump to the plan.
Don't jump to the plan. Even though it feels like they're ready for this plan, we could do this, always give them that chance to express because you want to get past that part of the brain or get that part of the brain involved and into the, as part of the team and then move on to the part that will execute.
Because if you don't know that, you won't make the chimp-friendly plan. It's got to help the chimp, hasn't it? There we go, another what would Led Zeppelin say? Ramble on.